Today I am going to be sharing with you the woven filling stitch, which you can see here. This is a great fill stitch to cover an entire area. You could also work it in smaller sections. And I'm also going to show you different varieties of threads that you can use to get a lot of visual interest with this one simple stitch. So let's get started. So the threads that I used in this example are all from DMC. These are the Cotton Redder's Mat. They are a slightly thicker thread that I think works up really well for this stitch. So that's what I'm going to use today. And then I'm also going to show you a few other threads that you can throw into the mix. For this stitch, you will want a tapestry needle. A tapestry needle has a tip that is not super sharp, and this is a woven stitch. And so the non-sharpness of the point of this needle will help us with this stitch. I also like to use smaller embroidery hoops when I am working on a stitch because it's a nice small area to work on your stitch and you have lots of practice space. In a small hoop, you can work just one stitch and create something really cool. And then you feel like you're creating something that is visually pleasing while you practice your stitches. And you have something nice to look at afterwards. So this is, I think this is like a 3-inch hoop, nice and small, doesn't feel overwhelming. So I like to start with my stitches vertically, and I always start in the middle. I find that when I'm just gonna do the length of this for the purpose of the video, I find it'll show you the stitch better and I can experiment with threads. So when I'm filling up an area, I like to start in the middle because it helps me to gauge my spaces. And a larger area like this, I might do, I'll show you when I do this stitch. So my first stitch, I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm bringing my thread up. I've knotted it in the back, so the knot stops that. And I'm just taking it down through the bottom of my fabric. Now, again, this is a larger area. If I was going to fill up this entire area with stitching, I would make my next stitch right over here, far away from this one, and then I would make another one right here. It's almost like you are creating an outline to then fill in, and it helps you keep your stitches straighter. It helps me anyway to keep my stitches straighter. I can eyeball my spaces that I'm filling, and I find that when I'm working this way, my stitches come up nice and neat, and I don't have to worry about, you know, curved lines. In this example, you can see I left open spaces here. That was definitely purposeful. It wasn't accidental. I wanted this to have some tightly stitched areas and some more open areas. So you can decide that as you're stitching this stitch. So for the purpose of the video though, I'm not going to fill up this entire hoop while we're stitching together. So I'm just going to do another stitch here. And then I'll do one more next to it. I want to show you how we get into weaving this and how we add other colors. So to create that plaid look like I showed you in my example hoop, I leave my threads hanging in the back. So I am not going to cut this one. I'm not going to tie this off, and I'm going to grab another color. So I'm using a darker pink right here, and I'm just going to cut a nice long length. I don't normally stitch with lengths of thread that are this long, but when I'm doing a woven stitch like this, I find that it helps me because I'm not stopping and starting as much, and I can have excess thread to work around with my project. So now I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to bring my needle up in between these two lines. And then I like to lay it down and then take my needle through. Again, I'm just gauging where my stitches are falling, how straight they're looking. Now I'm going to work onto this side. You can do this all in one color. You can be mindful of your threads on the back. You can do it just in two colors. You can have one color for your vertical and another color for your horizontal stitches. So now I'm going to pull out a tapestry thread. So this is a different texture, a different color, and we're going to play with the different thicknesses to see what kind of look we can make for this woven stitch. Okay, so I had wanted to put a stitch here, so I'm just going to bring this thread here. This is a really fun combination. It reminds me of spring. Then I'm going to fill in this area here with this. You can see you can work easily from top to bottom. You can switch around. And I'm going to add one more over here. Okay, so these are all the vertical stitches that I'm adding for now. Again, if I were doing this not on video, I would probably be filling the entire hoop up because I'm loving this color combination and this stitch looks really great as a fill stitch. So I'm still leaving all of these attached right now. And as you're stitching, you do have to be mindful of your stitches or of your loose threads that you don't get them tangled. So now I'm going to use another tapestry wool. And this is the DMC tapestry wool that I'm using. I knot the end, thread my needle, and now we're going to work on the horizontal stitches. So again, if I were doing the whole hoop, I would start here and work here. But for the sake of the video, I'm just doing this small section here. I do like to start in the middle, the same way that I start when I'm working vertically. So I bring my needle up, and now I'm just going to go over and under and over and under. This is the woven part of this stitch. And then pull your thread through. And then line it up, make sure it's nice and straight. Now this is a stitch that you also don't always have to work it in straight lines. You can curve your stitches. You can see that I did that along here because I wanted it to kind of like swoop up a little bit, and then I wanted it to swoop down and kind of follow the line of the hoop. So this is a super versatile stitch that you can do that with, and it doesn't need to be just straight lines that you're working with. So now I'm going to bring my thread up right next to this stitch, and I'm going to do the opposite. So I went over this stitch, so now I'm going to take it under and over, under and over, and do the reverse the whole way across, just like that. And then pull my thread through. Now as you are, before I take it down through the fabric, before I take my needle down, I like to just maneuver everything. It takes a little bit of playing with the threads to get them in place your first few stitches. This is like your foundation of your weaving, and so you do want to just make sure your stitches are where you want them. And you can see if I still need to move it around a little bit, I have some wiggle room there and can still keep adjusting for a little bit. So that's what it looks like with a tapestry thread. Now, other fibers that you can add into your weaving, you could use needlepoint yarns. You could use any sort of yarn. As long as you can thread a needle and bring it through the fabric, you can use the thread. So let's give this one a try. This is by Rainbow Gallery Threads. It's Baby Fluffy Fleece. I love the color of this. Now this one's going to be a tiny bit trickier just because it is a thicker thread, but I'm still able to knot it. And fortunately, tapestry needles have larger eyes. So this should be no problem at all threading. So it goes right through the needle easily enough. Okay. It might be a little trickier to bring up through your fabric, but it only needs to come up and down once. You just need to bring it up at the start and down at the end. So let's see how this one works. I'm going to hold my fabric because it wants to come up, but it wants to bring these other threads with it just because this is close to this stitch. So I just want to, it brought up this end. So I just need to bring that back through the fabric. Okay, so I have it up. It wasn't too tricky. And now I'm going to continue with my weaving. So I'm taking it over, under, the reverse of what I just did with my previous stitch. It didn't mess up my foundation stitches too bad. Nothing that I can't continue to adjust. That is a really cool look. And so I'm just going to take my needle down again. Again, it's a little bit trickier than if you're just using a regular thread, but I think it's worth a little bit of trouble, not trouble, just a little bit of extra effort to get that cool appearance of the thread. And you can always stick your needle through and just kind of like push the thread where you need it to go. And what if we do another one up here? We'll bring the needle up. Take it all the way through and do the reverse of this. So I'm going to go under and over. So you can see a whole hoop filled with this, I think would look really cool. And it's this is a great foundation for other stitches. With this project, I'm going to be layering things on top of this. So it's kind of like you're creating your own base fabric with the colors that you want, which is why I love this stitch. When you are completely done stitching and you still have all of your threads here, it's almost like a knitting or crochet project where you just weave your ends in. So I would just take my needle, go to the back, run it under a few threads, maybe tie a knot, and then cut it off, and you're good to go. One thread, but it's a really cool stitch to practice with different thicknesses of thread and different types of thread, and it really shows off those thicker threads that have a lot of dimension to them. So that's the woven filling stitch. I hope you have fun with this one, and happy stitching.